Let's meet someone who has spent nearly 50 years shaping Australian journalism, from the newsroom floor to executive boardrooms. I'm Kate Save. The Inspired CEO starts now. 50 years!
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible.
Doesn't feel like that, Kate. I'm still feeling young. You know, you're only as good as your last bit of work, and you're being watched and judged all the time. And, you know, you will sort of get up at 3 in the morning and think, oh my goodness, I don't know if I should have done that, or I should have done that differently, or here's a better headline. And of course, it's too late.
In this interview, we chat with Peter Blunden, seasonal Australian media leader, whose 5-decade career has seen him rise from cadet journalist to key executive roles across the Advertiser, Herald, the Weekly Times, and Corp Australia.
You produce things that are boring. See you later.
Yes.
You can't afford to be boring. I love this country, and to have been acknowledged by this country with an Order of Australia was certainly one of the great highlights of my career. I didn't ask for it. In my time in Melbourne, the biggest story by quite a long way was September 11. And I think we did 37 new pages in between midnight and 6 in the morning. We just kept the presses running and running and running.
Do you have any really dark memories of perhaps some of the biggest challenges or things that didn't go right? Yes. And what's it like reporting through to Rupert? Welcome to The Inspired CEO, where each episode we explore the innovative wellness practices that are driving success and longevity in the modern business world. In this interview, we chat with Peter Blunden, seasonal Australian media leader, whose 5-decade career has seen him rise from cadet journalist to key executive roles across the Advertiser, Herald, the Weekly Times, and Corp Australia. For years, he served in roles that placed him in Rupert Murdoch's inner editorial circle, earning praise from Murdoch himself as the best mid-market editor of his generation, and contributing significantly shaping the media landscape that we have here today. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Kate. Good to be here.
50 years.
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible.
Doesn't feel like that, Kate. I'm still feeling young, but I've been very fortunate. Been pretty remarkable few decades, and the landscape continues to change. It's always changed, but it's different. But it's been an amazing journey. And
tell me about this little pin that you're wearing here today.
I like to be a bit humble on things, but I'm very proud. I love this country, and to have been acknowledged by this country with an Order of Australia was certainly one of the great highlights of my career. I didn't ask for it,
yes.
but I'll take it on behalf of the profession of journalism and the company that I work for.
And I know that's not where you started. You started right at the bottom, is this right?
That's the only place to start.
Yeah.
You've got to work your way up. I'd like to think our business is a meritocracy. It's pretty interesting, and you're only as good as your last bit of work, and you're being watched and judged all the time. And if you're good enough and work hard enough, you can start at the bottom and work your way to the top.
So you started in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was your first role?
I started at the bottom, but I got a cadetship. I worked in Sydney, where a pretty vibrant atmosphere, very different from now. It was typewriters and people smoking. It was very noisy and loud, and the newspapers were literally printed beneath us as we came out. And it was a very, dare I say, I was hooked from the start. There was no turning back. I'd have done it for nothing, quite frankly. It really was that fascinating, and I knew from very early on, every day was different. It was amazing characters. I had a lot of fantastic mentors, which was important. And I watched and I listened, and opportunities presented themselves over the years.
And some of these opportunities required you to move with a day's notice, I've heard. What was the first opportunity?
Oh yeah. I think I was once asked, would I like to go to one of our bureaus in South Australia or Western Australia? Yeah, sure. Okay, you start Monday. So I ended up getting in the car and driving all weekend to Adelaide. That was back in 1980. So you're talking a long time ago, and I was the correspondent for the Australian, and so I had the whole state to myself. So it was everything to do with the Zaria Chamberlain case to all sorts of things, and so I learned a lot having to be accountable for what we produced. Then a couple of years later, I came back to Sydney. I was a reporter, ended up in Canberra. I was in the Canberra Press Gallery for The Australian when Hawke was Prime Minister in 84, 85, and then came back to Sydney, did a bunch of things, and then launched The Australian magazine, which was the first colour magazine in the Weekend Australian, which that was a big challenge. I think in your career, if you're thrown off the deep end often enough, you often think you're not capable of doing things until you're given that opportunity.
Yes.
And when you are, always believe in yourself and think you can do it. I'd have thought, this will be a bit difficult. Yeah. And then I was sent to South Australia as editor of the Advertiser.
Yes.
I didn't know when I was sent that we were going to be the first paper in colour in the
Oh.
company, so the pressure was on.
So very high cost.
Yeah, and it was a lot of moving. I did 6 years there, then came to Melbourne. In the mid-90s, I've been here ever since, and this is home. So it's 30 years of Melbourne.
Incredible. And so you were saying outside, so Rupert Murdoch had this idea for a global newspaper.
Yeah. Rupert started The Australian in 1964, and no one else really could have done that. I mean, he really believed in the concept of a national paper, that this country deserved to have one newspaper that told the stories of the day. And the logistics involved in doing that at the start were extraordinary, to actually get it transported and delivered. And other people wouldn't have persevered with it, but he did, and full credit to Rupert. And last year it celebrated its 60th anniversary. Gosh. And it's been a hell of an achievement. So it's been, I spent more than a decade on The Australian, and I was very proud to work on that paper, but I've spent 2/3 of my career in tabloids and 1/3 in broadsheets, is the way I'd put it.
So you must have had some very, very late nights and some sleepless nights as well. So some of these stories and choosing whether to publish or whether not to publish, what did that pressure feel like?
It's interesting, you make so many decisions as an editor every day. You've got the key to it, you've got to have good people around you that you can trust, seek advice. You are making a lot of calls. You've got to work out how big to go with something, what to ignore, what to go really big on. And quite often, you will sort of get up at 3 in the morning and think, oh my goodness, I don't know if I should have done that, or I should have done that differently, or here's a better headline. And of course, it's too late then.
It's too late.
The pressure, too late. Try and stop it. But no, it's not a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday job. Never has been. So got used to many, many, many years of finishing after midnight. It's a different profession. You have to, once you're given the responsibility though to actually edit a paper, the buck stops with you. Yes. So it's not a counting hours exercise, and you don't complain about it, but you're there when you need to be there. And if you've got the right team, the right people, the right journalists writing the stories, you're leading that team and setting, leading by example is really important. I mean, if you just come in and watch others do it, it's not going to work. And I think most business leaders would understand that, you're only as good as the team you're working with. And one of the great satisfactions I'd have would be watching the careers of other people blossom. And in fact, I look at those years in South Australia, most of the editors in our company now are people that I was fortunate enough to give cadetships to myself 35 years ago. And I'm really proud to watch their careers blossom. And so many people, once they're in the profession and doing well, they stick with it for life.
And I did hear you were definitely not someone to be found in the boardroom. You were always in the newsroom. You actually wanted to get your hands dirty and be in it.
You got to do a bit of both.
Yeah.
But ultimately, with the Herald Sun, we were selling 600,000 papers a day. We had a couple of million people reading it. So every decision you made was seen by a couple of million people, as opposed to a handful of people in the boardroom. I was always instinctively more concerned about what the readers were going to see than what others might have thought about. You've got to write for the audience, not for the person sitting next to you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So you've got to know who your audience is, and sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. But every day is different, and you're making decisions. Sometimes you're dealing with big happy stories. Other days you're dealing with disasters and horrible stories. So that's the thing, it keeps you on your toes.
Do you have any, really dark memories of perhaps some of the biggest challenges or things that didn't go right?
Oh, you're always going to get that. Nothing catastrophic.
Yeah.
people are watching you pretty closely, and people like to take you on, and you get into stoushes. Of course, you get into stoushes. You sometimes end up in court, or you have a blue. Doing those sort of jobs, you do get to know all the decision makers, and there's no way in the world you could do those sorts of jobs and not know the political leaders, the PMs and the premiers. You just have to, and whether you get on or you don't, you respect the fact that, and they have always respected the fact that we have it. The voters are reading our publications, and so with that, they take it very seriously. So that's all part and parcel of it. But no, there are dramas galore all the time. But that keeps you going.
And I think that leadership style, that culture, obviously changed a long time from when you would have first started with the typewriters and the cigarettes and those sorts of things. And how do you think your leadership evolved over 50 years?
I guess your mindset is shaped a fair bit by the people you work with early in your career. I mean, I saw people that they worked hard, played hard, and you become part of a culture of get the story first. It's always been a very competitive environment and continues to be. Very different competitors now, enormously different. But we've always gone head to head with had rival publications or rival media. So the hunt for the story, the chase is a big part of it. And you do get shaped by that. I mean, I did grow up in a very competitive culture where, and I inherited a couple of newspapers that were number one in their markets. And I guess, I didn't want to see them become number two on my watch.
No.
And they will become number two if you get it wrong.
Yes.
Or if you take the readers for granted, or you don't understand what's really on their mind. So being in touch, and of course, how do you know if that's the issue they want? You can't do a poll every day to say which story I should put on page one. So there is a certain amount of instinct, but also, I'm a great believer in sitting with the room saying, what do you think? I like to hear other opinions on what we should do.
And what are some of the biggest stories that stick in your mind that you ran?
Yeah. In my time in Melbourne, the biggest story by quite a long way was September 11.
Yes.
And so that night, the story didn't break until about 11 o'clock at night. So that ended up becoming like a 36-hour day because you just ran on adrenaline. You're back in the office, roll up the sleeves.
Hours.
And, I think we did, 37 new pages in between, midnight and 6 in the morning. We just kept the presses running and running and running. So there was no internet then. There was not much immediacy. There was a bit of story obviously started to break on TV, but we were able to produce a lot of papers for a long period on that story. There's been a lot of big stories that quite frankly grabbed the audiences and sold a lot of papers.
Yeah.
The death of Princess Diana.
Yes.
We had obviously we had Black Saturday and the Port Arthur tragedy. Always big. Unfortunately, the big stories often end up being the bad stories.
The bad stories. That's right.
Not a lot of massive stories that are happy. So we have to go searching for them. The key is sort of when you try to get to the mindset of people, you don't want to depress them constantly every day and deliver something onto their doorstep that they're just going to go through and think, oh, this is so depressing.
You've
got to find the light and shade. So there is a bit of a formula. Sometimes some days don't allow it because the story's so big.
Yes.
It's dominant.
Yes.
So you've got to work out on the days to give a bit of light and shade. But of course, things have changed so dramatically. We were pretty lucky for a long time to have, the newspaper was the dominant media, quite frankly, and had the biggest audience by a long way. There were more people read our newspaper here than all of the commercial TV news bulletins combined every night. So it really was like that, but it's a very cluttered environment now, and we've got to find our place in it.
And what does that look like now? Because I guess there's a lot of fake news out there too. How do you keep the trust and how do you continue the readership?
I think that's got to be the defining thing. I mean, if the audience doesn't trust what you're writing, you don't have a business.
Yes.
You don't. So integrity, trust, and people will have different interpretations of what they want to trust, and some people might trust other brands. But we certainly do our best to get everything right. It's the way that people think. People are wired a bit differently in their political views, but we like just to report things the way they are. There's a lot of, everybody knows that there's a lot of stuff in the the digital environment, which you can't trust. There is
That's
a lot
right.
of fake news.
Yes.
And if we're found, big companies like ours, to be deliberately producing something which is wrong, we're not in business. In
That's
fact, you
right.
wouldn't survive as an editor if you were ever found to be deliberately faking something or making something. You're out. You just are. And there might be the occasional mistake, but there's a difference between that and people sort of flooding, websites and digital platforms with deliberate misinformation.
Yes.
And we have to use the trust that our audience have in us as our defining characteristic.
Is there a role for influencers in the news? Obviously, they have their own social media channels, but is there any overlap there?
Why not? I mean, people are entitled to use it however they want, and if people trust that person and they develop an expertise in a topic, I think the answer for me, the answer would be there are plenty of people who have forged, careers out of online, out of their various blogs or TikTok videos, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. But if they're using it for for other purposes, yes, it has its place. I don't think it should ever be the primary source of news information, because it isn't news and information.
That's right. Yes.
But yeah, there's plenty of people making a name for themselves with big followings.
Yeah. And in terms of your balance now, so you've got 5 grandchildren between you and your partner and a very busy life. How do you find balance, and how do you look after your own health, mental health, physical health?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm in a great space. I sort of feel as though I'm much closer to the end of my career. I'm going to try to scale down a little bit. I do think generational change is really important.
Okay.
I'm not clinging on to anything.
Yeah.
I mean, up until last Christmas, I was overseeing our national network, so everything from sport and national news, etc., was answering through in my area, and I did that for 5 years. And I just felt myself that I should scale down a little bit from that and pass the baton.
Yes.
I do think that the changes in technology, and particularly with the emergence of AI, I think it's incredibly important that we have great expertise. I'm not going to be the person that's going to take us to the next level with working out how we can use AI.
Future.
The future. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm really happy for people who have more expertise than me in doing that. But I'll continue to stay involved, in all sorts of ways. But I think the technology is such that it presents enormous opportunities. I mean, young journalists now have opportunities to tell stories unlike any way they've ever told them before. And we see, and what's interesting as well, unlike the past, things can be measured so easily.
Yes.
And we can measure by the minute who's reading what story, how many people, when and how. We get the metrics are extraordinary in measuring who's subscribing, what story drove the person to subscribe, how many videos, watched video is obviously an enormous part of things, and obviously we are a forum, for comments and giving the consumers a voice. The audiences have never had a bigger voice than they've got now.
Yes.
Whether they want to create it themselves or use big brands like the ones that we have in Australia to actually express their views.
Fascinating. That evolving 50 years that you've seen, nobody has been in that role with this organisation as long as you're apart from Rupert himself. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know. I sort of stopped counting. The time goes so quickly. I never. You don't really count the years because I've always done something different, and I encourage people in business to sort of look to reinvent yourself as often as possible. I mean, if you told me 30 years ago I'd still be in Melbourne and working in the company, I probably said that wouldn't happen. But I do think changing roles a lot. Like I came out of the journalism for a while and I was managing director of the business. I probably don't have a lot. So I probably don't have as much expertise with numbers as I do with words. Hopefully.
Yes.
But I did that for about 6 years, and I saw it from the other side of the fence, and so that really helps. And it also helped I think editing that I'd worked in Canberra, and it helped as an editor that I'd been a journalist and been a reporter. I mean, it was everything from a TV journalist, a TV writer to police and politics, and learning different skills along the way equips you much better to be able to carry that bit of gravitas in a newsroom. Because I can tell you that the environment a lot of time is, what would they know? They haven't done this or they haven't been there. But I'd encourage people in business to develop as many skills and experience, develop a deep knowledge of the area that they're running.
Yeah, and having that bigger picture as well, so that you've seen all aspects and how the business runs, not just running in the business. And what's it like reporting through to Rupert?
Oh no, I've been fortunate to work with the family for all those years. It's been, I wouldn't swap anything.
Amazing.
And generationally, I mean, Dame Elizabeth and Sir Keith Murdoch were really great Australians, and Rupert has run with that, and I think clearly he was inspired by his parents, and they're amazing people, and that's gone through to Rupert, the rest of Rupert's family, and now Dame Elizabeth's granddaughter Penny is my chairman at HWT, and she's a great leader, and so the family's been amazing to work for, and it's been a real privilege. I've been very fortunate to do that. Sounds like I'm just grovelling to the boss. It's not the case at all.
You love it. You wouldn't still be in it.
I wouldn't. No. I wouldn't. They've inspired me, and I think one of the things that Rupert's always done is he's been genuinely interested and curious about news, amazing work ethic, extraordinary intellect, and just driving the business from setting by example. I mean, he's been there from the start and built this business up, from starting with the Adelaide News into that. So it didn't happen by a fluke. Yes. So I've been lucky to be reasonably close to that action, and been driven by that ambition all the way through.
Amazing. And a last piece of advice. So what makes good media?
I think understanding your audience and being able to tell a story in a compelling way, getting it right, and for the audience to be able to say, now I know more than before that. I mean, there are some terrific journalists in this country in all forms of media. There's been some outstanding people, and establishing credibility and authority and knowledge, you've got to work out who you trust. I'm a great believer in, you listen to some people or you switch off to others, and that's earned. Yes. It can take years to actually earn that trust of the audience. Yeah. So I think knowing the audience, giving the audience, you'll succeed if you provide the audience with what they need and what they want. Don't bore them, inform them, but entertain them as well. I mean, you produce things that are boring. See you later. Yes. You can't afford to be boring, and it's sort of an average news list will. You've got to pass that boring test.
Yes, that's right.
And you've got to say, is this too lightweight? Is this too heavy? What's the sort of mix? And what are the issues that people are really talking about? And I do think what makes it important is a greater thing, not just selling the product, but where you have the opportunity to make a difference. I mean, it's a privileged position to get up every day and be able to reach so many people. Yes. And it's not taken for granted. It's a really amazing asset to have in your career, and you've got to use, and if you can use that to make a difference and make people's lives better, then I think that's enormously gratifying. If we just did it, without purpose. Yes. I mean, we do have a purpose. We do like to improve our communities, and if we see something wrong, we'll make a noise about it. I mean, we've got a lot of things happening in Melbourne now that I think are very worrying, and I think it's our responsibility to
raise the alarm,
and push for change. Yes. And it's hard to get sometimes because there's a lot of people out there that don't want to listen. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you, there are more issues I think to concern people than we've had for a while. But on the more positive front, we can make a difference. And I do look at things like the Good Friday Appeal, which our company started in 1931, and it's about to reach its 95th year.
Incredible.
And it's raised nearly $400 million. Wow. For the hospital, and we have a fantastic Royal Children's Hospital here, which frankly wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't be the great hospital it is today unless and that's owned by the community. We run it. It was started by a bunch of journalists in our company all those years ago, and we continue to run it now. We're really proud of the fact that this community is very tight-knit. They care about children's health. There's nothing more important than the health of kids. And that's where working in a media company and reaching audiences can make a real difference. And that changes lives. In fact, saves lives sometimes.
Yeah. What an incredible way to finish. So going from the headlines that bring people into the really really good work and the passion and knowing you're making a difference.
Yeah, no, it is gratifying.
Well, thank you, Peter. This is the Inspired CEO, and we'll be right back.